The electricity companies, at least the ones I could find information about, they didn't talk about selling electricity because no one knew what that was or why they wanted it. It sounds like very scary. It's this thing that's like...
There are questions about your views on Jan LeCun's view that LLMs are a dead end. How do you see education? What is your spiciest take of all? What are the three most likely forks of the universe you see over the next 10 years?
First of all, in terms of achieving human-level intelligence, these models have already far surpassed human intelligence in some ways.
What are the product analogies, the research analogies you find most useful?
I've been very interested in studying how, I think what is happening is we are in the process of creating a new utility. This doesn't happen very often. You know, electricity is a utility, internet's a utility, water, I guess, there's not a lot of these. And so there are not a lot of examples that we can study for good metaphors or learnings about how to explain this to the world. But I was recently looking at what happened when electricity became a utility. And it's a good analogy for many reasons. It's imperfect, of course, too. But the electricity companies, at least the ones I could find information about, they didn't talk about selling electricity because no one knew what that was or why they wanted it. It sounds like very scary. It's this thing that's like going to come into your house and it can kill you in this like gruesome way. And, you know, it feels sort of like very different than the world before. And maybe they tried to sell electricity or market electricity at first. I don't know. But in any case, that didn't work. And then what they started marketing, selling to people was light at night. You know, what you are getting from us is not electricity. It's light at night. By the way, you can use the same thing that lets you get light for all these other things. But people are like, well, why would I want that? And they're like, well, you know, it'll wash your clothes for you someday. And no, it won't. I can't. That's too far of a jump for me.
All right.
So I don't know what our analogy for this should be. But I suspect that even if we're totally right and intelligence is going to become this new utility that every company, every customer, every government just needs access to and is going to use in all sorts of incredible ways. And you will have like a OpenAI token subscription that you will plug into everything and use to access everything. And you have running for you all the time and doing this amazing stuff. I kind of don't think, at least right now, the right way for us to analogize that is we're selling intelligence because people are just like somehow not resonating. I don't know what our equivalent of we're selling you light at night is going to be. But I think if we're going to become a new utility, we need to find a way to explain to the world what it means to have this like intelligence pike that you can just do whatever you'd like with.
There are questions about your views on Jan LeCun's view that LLMs are a dead end.
First of all, in terms of achieving human level intelligence, these models have already far surpassed human intelligence in some ways, and then they're wildly worse than others. Like, for example, they seem much worse than people are at very long horizon, kind of high judgment signal and tasks. On the other hand, yesterday, we had one of our models disprove a conjecture, one of the Erdős problems that smart people had worked on for a long time. And a lot of smart scientists, I don't know if LeCun was one of them or not, had even quite recently said something like that was not going to happen. And then like the model just did it. And, you know, now you have all these mathematicians saying like, is math over? What does this mean for our field? So clearly LLMs are capable of figuring out new knowledge. And clearly they are capable of doing some intelligence tasks that humans just can't do. They are going to scale much further. So how much better and what distribution of the tasks they can do better than humans, we'll find out, but I suspect it's a lot. And in terms of this like lack of a belief in the exponential we were talking about earlier, I think the field was honestly held back by a generation of scientists who just were way too certain on what scaling was not going to produce. And then some people just looked at the graphs and said, well, it looks like it's continuing beautifully. Let's keep going. I think world models are clearly important and we'll need that for things like robotics. But betting against LLM scaling at this point feels quite misguided to me.
How do you see education?
It clearly has to super adapt, and I am worried. I thought by now it would have. I I think if we continue to teach and evaluate students as if we were in a pre-AGI world, it's not going to work, and it is going to lead to like atrophy of learning how to think or whatever. And I thought that was going to be obvious enough that I wasn't that worried. You know, when ChatGPT launched, I was like, yeah, we're going to have 1 year of like students like cheating and not learning that much. And then the educational system is just going to redesign itself, and we're going to teach people so much better. You know, people are going to really get projects where they have to use AI to be able to do it, but they still have to like stretch their brain more and think more and figure out new things to do. And honestly, I struggle to point to any significant systemic change that I've seen in the education system at large in the 3.5 years since ChatGPT launched. And that was a prediction error for me. I thought that would have happened. So I have no doubt that we can, like we have done with every other technological leap before, redesign how education works so that you still have to learn how to think. And there will be some things like I am a person who thinks by writing, and I write a lot of stuff that I never show anyone else, but it's still important to me to figure something out. And so I'm grateful that I learned to write. People say the same thing about programming. So there will be some things that we teach people to do that machines can do better just because it's helpful to teach them the meta skill of thinking and learning, and that makes sense. But there are a lot of other things where we should just totally change how we teach or how we learn or how we evaluate. And if we don't do that, I think there will be like significant atrophy in people's critical thinking skills.
What is your spiciest take of all?
I think with more time to think, I could come up with a much spicier one, but I think AI is just going to keep going. And I think this is considered, I don't think this is like widely believed yet. And I think if this were widely believed, there would be like significantly more reverberations than are happening through society right now. And maybe I don't have the spicier take. Actually, maybe this is the high order bit, that if AI progress continues on the exponential that it's on for another, it's been 3.5 years since ChatGPT. Even if it were another 3.5 years on that same trajectory, the world, the potential, the way that what society is capable of are just completely different.
What are the 3 most likely forks of the universe you see over the next 10 years? And what is your probability assessment on each of those? Does that make sense?
One that feels very important is like, how much is this technology going to be very widely democratized versus how much is it going to sit in a few companies? I think there are all of these reasons why you could imagine the default is that this gets concentrated to a few companies and they become like, you know, a significant fraction of the wealth on earth. That would obviously be terrible, and we work super hard to push against that. But I think that's going to require like the will of the world to really avoid, because there is a sort of a tractor state there. And I think part of the reason that we need to push to this kind of utility model of the world is that A, it's quite unstable and quite bad and will feel quite unfair if a few companies have all of this. But B, I think there's a real alignment failure and a very fragile world. And the best way to get to a world we want that represents like everybody winning and everybody's values being represented, everybody having agency, is to just push this technology out into the world. But there will be a very strong argument against that around sort of safety and stability. And I think that will be a big fork, and it's very important. And I encourage all of you in your careers to push hard that this is a technology. It can bring us an incredible sci-fi future. Life can be unbelievably much better. We are going to incur some risk to get there, but the risk of keeping this concentrated in a handful of companies, even though we would be one of these companies, is not something we should tolerate. So I think that would be a big fork. In terms of probability, I think the world should have such an interest in it happening this way that I think it's like 80% we end up on the democratic path. But there will be a very strong safety message, and you know, there will be a lot of power-seeking people who want to concentrate the power.